When Jean left the battlefield due to Deepu's dimensional shift, the remaining comrades in the center of Rickalton were rescuing prisoners. Quack! Ugh! Thank you, thank you. Every time a member of the Bamul Alliance picked a fruit, a mixture of screams, tears, and expressions of gratitude poured out. About 50 people per fruit. Of most of the fruits that fell to the ground, only about 30% of them were alive. There were more fruits with more survivors trapped in them, but there were more fruits that did not react even when the skin was cracked. This is Alyssa Badger, commander of the Tychon garrison. Come outside and go where you can see the light. This is Gilly McLaurin of the Barmal Coalition. Go where you see the light. If you are unable to move, you must take care of it yourself. It may be difficult, but please remain calm. Hi, it's Nodav Sarsing. Are there any members of our fan club here? Now is not the time. Go over there. I came to save you. Ghost Captain, can you see the blue light over there? Get there somehow. Then our wizards and knights will protect you. Hell is right here. My colleagues were running non-stop with that mindset. There were already hundreds of fruits that had fallen on the ground, and the trees near the castle were still shaking them off. The blue light where the prisoners gathered was a huge recording window that Valeria had opened. Instead of participating in the rescue, she and Qual Enyahito were tasked with guarding the gathering prisoners and gathering information. As soon as the Valeria flare went off, Jin's energy suddenly disappeared. Is there anything that appears in the history window? He's concentrating right now, so he can't answer. Wait a moment, I'll read the log window. Qual responded to Hito's words and looked at the recording window. As he said, Valeria was unable to hear other people's voices at all, as she was busy extracting records of the entire battlefield. There you are, moving through Deepu's Runkendal and the power of the evil spirit. Well, the name of the area Jean moved to has not been revealed yet. I can see that the letters are vaguely trying to come together and will appear in the window over time. Hito felt a little uncomfortable about Jean leaving the battlefield, but he wasn't too worried. Unless the evil spirit moved directly, there would be no one in Huffister who could kill him. Jiffel and Kinzelo's fleet is running late. That means that they are also dealing with an army of evil spirits, including a mix of superhuman-level strongmen. It is unlikely that Jean can handle them all. Did the fourth horseman lure Jean for a one-on-one fight? About 100 prisoners had already reached the recording window, and many more prisoners were crossing the black field. Things are going so easily. The Chaos troops are strangely invisible, Quicantle said as he carefully placed a fruit on the ground. If you say something like that, there will be trouble, Mr. Quicantle. Like now, Hito said as he drew his sword. What he is looking at is the main gate of Rickcarlton Castle. From there, a woman wearing a black robe was walking out. Prophet Elina Runkendal. Hito immediately spread his sword in that direction, and Elina dispersed like fog, then regained her shape and shook off her clothes. Hito shrugged his shoulders and took a cigarette as if he had expected that to happen. Damn it. Given the circumstances, it seems like he was a prophet. That annoying guy has come out. You can just fight a warrior or a wizard, but you can easily deal with something like that if you have a special power like Jean. This must be the reason why the fourth horseman lured Jean. The problem is not combat power, but the disadvantage of the situation. In addition to having to fight while protecting the prisoners, there were too many unknown aspects of Elina's abilities. To all the royalty warriors who visited Rickhalton, are you having fun rescuing prisoners? Elina's amplified voice rang lightly throughout the battlefield. Hito's eyes were fixed on her like nails, and his companion's rescue was slowed by the fear of their captives. Seeing as there is no answer, it doesn't seem to be a good idea. So I prepared a gift for you. Clap, clap. Elina clapped her hands, and suddenly a circle appeared in the middle of the trees where the prisoners were tied. It was snow. This was followed by the bizarre sight of the trees' trunks spreading sideways and pulling out their arms and legs. Crazy. That wasn't a tree, but some kind of monster. The monsters that had just looked like trees were raising their crouching bodies. The part where the fruit grew was like a head and hair, and when the legs that were embedded underground like roots spread out, each monster was bigger than Rickhalton Castle. These are giant beasts that I created with the help of the head of the family. Everyone has dealt with a graveyard giant, right? It's similar to them. It's just that it has a few humans hanging on the fruit on its head. Would you say it is some kind of accessory? This means that there are restrictions on the party's ability to destroy the giant beast. If you're too careful, the giant god tree's fruits will also be shattered by your party's attacks. My head hurts. But that guy called a prophet doesn't seem to have the power to eliminate us. I was thinking that too. Most of the colleagues suddenly felt impatient, but Hito and Quikantle read the situation calmly. I have a strong feeling that this is a ploy to buy time, by making it difficult to rescue prisoners. That may be the reason why there are so few Chaos armies. We know that if we engage in a melee with a large number of troops, the prisoners will be used up too quickly, so there will be no reason for us to fight cautiously. Now, I don't think I'm wasting time because of the recovery of Deepoo's, who has already entered into battle with Jean. The purpose is probably to control the evil spirit. Seeing as they are putting on an obvious show, they must also be feeling a sense of crisis. Tactically, it would be better to give up all prisoners immediately and advance, thus thwarting the author's intentions. But that wouldn't be Jin's way. You're already talking like a Bamul ally. Adaptation is quick. I am concerned that if Jean suffers in the future, Miss Sandra will cause an uproar. If you advance, you might get caught in a trap. First of all, it would be best to react calmly until temporary allies arrive. I just remembered the numbers. Go. The giant beasts began to advance. Every time they moved, a dark, low-pitched cry and an unpleasant noise of trees twisting spread out. One of them threw a fist towards the ground. It was aimed at Lotta, but he easily dodged the attack and even saved several prisoners who were bounced by the shockwave. But not all colleagues can do it like Lotta. Those who are relatively incompetent, like the youngest division, will have to prepare for fatal injuries whenever they dodge the giant god beast's attacks. Then I hope that meeting the giant beasts will give you more thrilling pleasure. I will now leave. After saying these words, the prophet returned to Rickalton Castle. Mr. Quikantle, please bring Julian and the leader of the Black King. Quikantle quickly came to see them running on the battlefield. Julian, from now on you will be excluded from rescuing prisoners on the ground. Instead, move together with the Black King and harvest the fruits attached to the giant tree. Julian drops the fruit on the giant tree with the Thunderbolt Harmilla, and Bacchus moves it near the recording window. Hito planned to rescue the prisoners on the giant beast that way, by using Julian's shooting ability and Bacchus' power. There is no need to perfectly bring the Black King's fruit all the way here. Throw it from as far away as possible and I will catch it all. Also, there is no need to be too accurate. Even if you throw me a little off the mark, I can create a sword wind and catch it. I understand. Bacchus wondered for a moment whether that was possible, but then remembered Hito's incredible power and nodded. Bacchus will have a particularly hard time. You will have to pay attention to protecting your allies while securing the fruit of the giant god tree. Excluding Hito, who is an off-topic superhuman, Bacchus is the only 10-star member of the group, so he had to take on a large role in protecting his allies. Of course it is, but the Black King leader will not be very burdensome. Because... Whoa! Suddenly Hito took a step forward and cut into the air. The sword shot out like a light and struck the wrist of the giant beast that was falling to the ground. The giant beast originally aimed at Mesa Milano and struck down its fist, but it could not overcome the sword's backlash and took a step back. Because in this way I will cover the entire battlefield and protect my troops from this position. Hito cannot leave his seat. The moment he moved, the prisoners gathered here were dead. In addition, the place for the rescued people to gather disappears, causing a setback in Valeria and Qual's analysis. Of course you two are a monster. I immediately thought of a way to respond, so I tried to do something, but it was just helplessness. His colleagues were impressed, but Hito was disappointed. He thought that if he had been in charge of Dyphus and Jean had been here, the prophet would not have been able to pull off such a trick. They must have calculated that in the first place and stole the camp. The total number of giant beasts is 8. Hito didn't miss a single move they made. There may come a moment when you reach your limit because you are just powerless. Before that, let's rescue as many prisoners as possible and hold out until the allies arrive. We also need one person to infiltrate Rickalton Castle. I think 7th Rider Mary Runkendall would be the right person for that. I will pass it on. Miss Enya, focus only on the rear from now on. I don't think I can pay any attention to the rear. Yes, don't worry. Lord Hito. As he made the giant beasts hesitate with a few more long-distance supports, his colleagues were able to focus on rescuing the prisoners again. Hito's sword energy continued to spread like a shining string between Rick Alton Castle and the gathering place. Flash. Every time Julian's Thunderbow Harmilla fired an arrow, the fruit of the giant god tree fell without fail. Bacchus snatched the fruit from the air and safely sent it to the gathering point. Unlike the fruits obtained that had already fallen to the ground, most of the prisoners trapped inside were still alive. The pace of rescue was increasing. Enya took out the prisoners who arrived with the fruit, and those who walked directly behind Hito fell to the ground. Most of the prisoners felt relieved that they had survived, but only for a moment. Aya! My arm, my arm! The wizard's daughter was left behind in the castle. Please, please save me. Please. People consumed by fear are difficult to control. Starting with the person whose family is still trapped somewhere among those fruits, the person who can't hold back their screams because of the pain, the person who has a mental breakdown and tries to escape the ranks again for no reason, the person who grabs Enya and begs for help, and then the person who carelessly leans on Qual's machine, etc. Sobbing and groaning. As the number of rescued people increased, the prisoners' concentration area protected by Hito became chaotic. There are already too many people whose family members have died, who have been maimed, and who are in mourning. Among them, those who still maintained their sanity tried to stop them, but if things continued like this, problems would soon arise in Valeria and Qual's analysis. Enya is an excellent wizard. The reason her colleagues left her at the prisoner rendezvous point was because her magic specialized in defense. But Enya was also a very kind person. In these situations, he lacks the cool-headedness to control people even by using harsh methods. Originally, Hito or Valeria Qual should have taken on that role, but all three were too focused on the prisoners to care at all. Stay still. Everyone stay in line. If you don't follow the controls now, it will be difficult to help you. Even if Enya shouted, not many prisoners would listen. Some of the prisoners even scolded Enya, asking what was the use of all this. I shouldn't be frustrating. No matter how pitiful the prisoners are, if I don't control them now, my allies will be in danger. If Lord Hito steps forward, instead of me, my colleagues and other prisoners being rescued who were not protected by Lord Hito may die. Soon Enya gritted her teeth and raised her staff to attack the prisoners who were trying to get out of control, unleashing magical power. Even if it was cruel, we had to subdue them with force. Enya's staff was trembling slightly. It was unexpected to aim the staff at the prisoners rather than the chaotic army. There is nothing we can do if you continue to cause trouble. Get back to your ranks immediately. This is your final warning. Yes, kill me. Who asked me to save me? I've already lost my entire family. There's nothing to live for, so I'd rather... Ugh! Enya's eyes widened as the captive suddenly collapsed. Although she really intended to subdue it, she was not the one who defeated the captive now. Someone had used magic before Enya. These crazy bastards don't even know how to be thankful. He was a prisoner who had just arrived at the rendezvous point and had a bad relationship with Enya. I am a magic officer in the Pascal Chip Imperial Guard. From now on, those who do not comply with the control will be subject to military law. Did the people who risked their lives and stormed into this hell to save strangers look funny? You make a person like that aim his staff at you rather than the enemy? Pascal? Pascal Chip, the leader of the group of cadets who bullied Enya at Beamont Academy in the past. He had become a completely different person after Jin's operation to eradicate the Dark Magic Association when he was a reserve rider and had become a full-fledged officer of the Imperial Guard. And during the invasion of Deepoo's, he was taken prisoner while protecting civilians as a garrison, and even after being rescued, he was still trying to fulfill his duty. Someday, I will definitely repay this favor. What Pascal said after the Dark Magic Society was wiped out. After that day, I said I would repay the favor somehow someday. I never thought I could help in a moment like this. There are members of the Imperial Guard among the prisoners being rescued, so I will work with them to keep them under control. Mage Captain Tychon, please concentrate on what you are doing. The commotion quickly subsided as Chip subdued several more rioting prisoners. If Enya had done it, the result would have been the same, but she would definitely have been left with a psychological shock. Enya nodded. I understand, Sir Pascal. I'll leave it to you. This is how the confusion at the prisoner concentration area was resolved. Enya again concentrated her efforts on defending the rear, and Hito, who was momentarily aware of the commotion in the rear, swung his sword without hesitation. The sun did not rise due to the heat wave, but it was past 6 o'clock in the morning. 3 hours after the rescue operation began, nearly 3,000 prisoners had gathered at the assembly area. Although they are far less than the estimated number of people approaching 100,000, they are by no means small. Now the prisoners were taking care of each other's wounded and picking up the dead who were unable to hold out. Fortunately, there have been no serious casualties among the members of the Bamel coalition so far. Most of them had minor injuries and were still running around the fields and taking fruits from giant beasts. However, there were no physical problems. I couldn't help but get tired after running around this hellish island for several hours. In particular, Hito and Mary were the ones that consumed the most stamina. A puddle of sweat was forming where Hito was standing, and Mary was breathing heavily and repeatedly approaching and being pushed away from Rick-Carlton Castle. Ha ha ha! There was no other reason why Mary had not yet penetrated the castle. The giant beasts were intensively keeping Mary in check whenever she reached a certain distance. Thanks to this, the giant beasts are unable to advance as intended, and Hito is relieved of some of the burden, so it is not that there is no harvest. Sister! Daytona leapt in front of Mary and swung her great sword. The giant beast's fist, which was aiming at Mary, twisted, and Daytona hit the rock that flew behind Mary's back. Are you okay? Whoa, what are these bastards doing here? Don't worry about me, go save the prisoners. Did you really think I couldn't even hit this level? You are so tired. If you continue to try to break through alone like this and your stamina depletes further, you will be overwhelmed when a situation arises inside Rick-Carlton Castle. Anyway, this is the area that Daytona and I are in charge of. As you can see, we have no prisoners left alive. Mary was so exhausted that she didn't even realize that she had been pushed back to Brother Tana's territory. Ha damn! We will provide cover even near the outer castle. Anyway, there were prisoners near the outer castle, so we were about to move. I won't say that we will enter Rick-Carlton Castle together. Our hearts are like chimneys, but we know that's not our role. So please allow it. Mary made eye contact with her younger siblings. As I looked into their hard, determined eyes, I wondered if these were really the Tana brothers. I thought you were just a body, but now you guys are finally acting like people. Isn't it all thanks to you and the youngest? I'm trying to follow what you said last time to have a little bit of a strong corner. The words came out crudely, but Mary remembered the fact that the Tana brothers were with her when she and Deepu's resisted Rosa before Jean returned. It occurred to me that maybe the Tana brothers were already quite reliable brothers from then on. No, it definitely was. Okay, let me lean back a little. You can make sure I don't have to clean up your bodies on the way, right? Of course, sister. Let's go. As she began to break through again, Mary felt that the path was opening up more easily than before. Get out, you monsters, you mad woman of the southern continent, and the son of hell, get out. Ka-ha-ha-ha-ha. Get out, get out. Crazy things. The giant beasts who had become accustomed to keeping Mary in check were losing their momentum. The siblings were able to reach the outer castle in just about 20 minutes. Mary was able to save up some stamina, and the Tana brothers had enough energy left to go back the way they came. This is enough. The lines you spoke out in response to evil were like trash, but you've grown considerably stronger, haven't you? Ha. Thank you. Now go back. From here on, don't move alone. I think I can fit in without being pushed out. Because we defeated almost all the giant beasts. Who wook, sister? Why? I wish you good luck. Just as Brother Tana was about to hold Mary's hand and lower his head, Mary suddenly raised a poisonous snake and looked in all directions. I felt alive. It was a killing that felt like a distinct hatred that was completely different from that of the giant beast. Upon confirming the source of the deadly force, the Tana brothers had no choice but to distort their faces and scream. "There are things here that will tear you to death? You said you were literally reduced to dust during the all-out attack on the Garden of Swords, but you came back to life?" Mu and An. They were looking down at the three siblings from the outer castle. "Oh really? It's a scene I can't watch without tears. Wishing you luck? Since when have you been so close? Hey, I'm a 7th rider. You used to be so proud, but have you fallen to the point where you have to get help from those bastards? I feel so sorry for it that I wonder if I can kill it." The siblings did not respond but glared at Mu and An. "If it's found, it should be buried in the ground nicely. What kind of cockroach is it? I don't know why there are so many bugs coming back to life these days. But if you think about it, it's right for you to end it with your own hands. Come down and let's have a fight. I won't survive this time. It's a day to end a long bad relationship. The persecution, humiliation I have received so far. I'll give it all back today with interest, you bastards." While Mu and An were laughing at Brother Tana's words, Hey Tana quietly whispered to Mary, "Sister will deal with those, so go into that gap. They are not at a level you can handle right now. I don't even have the stamina to go back." "No, sister. There is no answer to running away anyway. And we also have a room. I have no intention of dying in your place, so please go quickly. Even if we get pushed back in the fight, Haytona and I just have to hold on until our temporary allies arrive. Then good luck." Even though they had not discussed in advance how to deal with such a situation, the Tana brothers were already leaping towards Mu and An without Mary having time to think. And lightly swung her dual swords and fired sword energy. He was planning to shake off the Tana brothers who were rushing at him and aim straight for Mary. However, the Tana brothers showed their power by avoiding and sword skills and instantly demolishing one side of the outer wall where Mu and An were standing. Because the castle wall was broken, Mu and An had to find a landing spot and jump to check Mary's location again. Mary was already rushing toward the sanctuary, but dust and debris momentarily obscured her. "These bugs. Kayakyakia, you missed it, right? You thought we would just get away with one hit, right? And you take charge of those. I am Mary." Mu, who had been talking up to that point, looked ahead in shock. Before he knew it, Daytona was aiming his sword in front of him. "We are your opponents, Mu. Aren't you looking too down on it? Well, you don't know how much effort we've put in to catch you all, so it's possible. Oh, I still haven't figured out the situation, so I sat there worrying about Sister Mary. Hey, An, come to your senses, you almost passed out. Huh? Oh, you mean that even if I cut it, I can just put it back on?" Confusion was flowing like a trickle of blood from An's neck. Haytona tried to lick the chaos from the chainsword, as was her habit, but after confirming that it was not blood, she spat out. Mu created a sword wind and kicked up the dust. Mary was nowhere to be seen. The sisters quickly became irritated but soon gave up on Mary and turned to face Brother Tana. There was Elina in the inner city anyway, so there was no need to pursue her too hard. However, I was unbearably angry at the fact that this situation had been created by the Tana brothers, whom I had always looked down on like bugs. It would have been better for Mary to die by our hands. You still have no clue. I've changed my mind. I'll deal with you, and I'll save you. You will live to see all the words of the traitors who rebelled against your mother. Eat this if it's noisy. This is the family's 11th decisive battle. 11th. There are a total of 10 decisive battles in Runkendal. Because of this, the Mu sisters wondered for a moment whether there was a decisive battle that they were unaware of. In other words, I was caught off guard. Meanwhile, the Tana brothers were already carrying out their own joint flag. I have experienced many swords in the past, but this is the first time I have seen such a messy, rambling, and mean combination of swords. How much more so would Runkendal, the world's greatest swordsman, show me this newly created decisive battle machine? Ah, are you going that far backwards? Lord Hito. It's literally trash. I've never even imagined such an ugly sword. Is there absolutely no room for improvement? No, but it's not a sword that should just be thrown away. There are times when it's too messy to be effective. Unless you are a super expert, you will be embarrassed when faced with something like this. I think it would be very effective against those who lack depth. Did you give it a name? I named it Tana Nanmu. I think it would be more appropriate to call it something like Tana Jumble or Tana-style raw eating Mexium. Namura, that's right. Still, since it's called a decisive battle, the name should be a little more polite. Be sure to use it only to embarrass your opponent and then look at winning. The reason why the Tana brothers took out the joint technique, Tana Nanmu, and called it the family's 11th secret technique was because they received such advice from Hito immediately after completing the technique. This is the family's 11th decisive battle? That can't be possible. As soon as the wild dance started, Sister Mu's face distorted. The Tana brothers, living up to their name, were already wandering all over the place. As the great sword split the ground, the chain sword cut through it, and the brothers' rampage did not stop even for a moment. The problem was that many of those attacks did not reach Sister Mu at all. Sister Mu laughed as she swatted away the occasional stone fragments. Next is the third decisive battle, the meteor shower. The fifth secret technique, light speed stab. Then when the Tana brothers started talking nonsense while they were dancing, Sister Mu started to flinch a couple of times, so she gathered her soul with the intention of suppressing it with force. There was nothing better than destroying such a baseless sword. However, the Tana brothers seemed to have anticipated all of this and launched a decisive battle just as Sister Mu gathered her energy. The fourth and sixth decisive battle of Lightning and Fall Runkendal. Daytona was in full bloom and Haytona was in full glory, jumping out of the chaos. Squeak dash. Whoops! The swords of brother and sister mixed together and a shock wave spread. The ones who were pushed out more were the Tana brothers, but before they knew it, they were dancing wild again and upsetting Sister Mu. Kakiki. I was fooled again. Mu and met all of the conditions Hito had mentioned. This is their first time experiencing this ridiculous decisive battle, and although they have become stronger due to marriage, they lack the depth of a warrior. Wow, that's a truly bug-like technique. And snorted, but the sisters were clearly unable to effectively deal with the vomiting. The one shot that Brother Tana had told Mary was putting pressure on the sister very effectively. However, Wild Dance had a fatal drawback. The physical drain is extreme. The Tana brothers could run wild in their current state for only about 10 minutes at most. The brothers could only survive if they fought it out or if allies came to their aid. After that time passes, there will be no stamina left to run away. As the fight between Brother Tana and Sister Mu continues. Even on the battlefield where they were still fighting to the death in the fields of Rickalton Castle, behind them new enemies were appearing. Jushin, are you okay? Luton shouted. A former executive knight of Runkendal, he was currently leading the youngest division to rescue prisoners. The giant beast's fist was splitting the ground and fragments were constantly flying towards Luton and the youngest division. Thanks to Hito, we were rarely attacked directly, but sometimes there were dangerous moments. It's okay. Stick to Scut and rest for a while. You can't continue the operation if you're that exhausted. Mesa, please take charge of Jushin's area for a while. Yes, Lord Luton. The field was full of huge cracks created by giant beasts. Luton caught a fruit that was about to fall through a crack and discovered that its insides led to a tunnel. This is what Lord Jean said. Padash. As soon as Luton recognized it, a ray of black energy rose from underground and passed by his cheek. Soon Luton retreated and swung his sword, attracting the attention of the youngest division. Knights wearing black robes came out of the tunnel. Luton recognized their attire as old-fashioned black blade robes from when he was an executioner. Luton. He was really alive. Was it you, Vex? Then next to me would be Rihanna Sinatra. It is an honor that you remember our name, former executioner Luton Furman. Suppress Joshua Runkendal of the Black Sword Society. John name. Line Bex Rihanna, even Sinatra. Are you saying you all were part of the Black Sword Society? Vex line Rihanna Sinatra. They were the knights who belonged to the Black Sword Society and subdued Rosa when he caused Joshua to fall. Before they became members of the Black Sword Society, they had performed missions together as executive knights like Luton. I heard from Lord Jean that you guys are still acting like Rosa's dogs. But I didn't know that the family would still be there even after it got to this point. If I had any pride, I would have chosen to fight and die alongside the resistors when Rosa was corrupted. It sticks out like this. The hunting dog that was abandoned but was lucky enough to be picked up by the 12 horsemen speaks brilliantly. How about you swear allegiance to the head of the family again? Then I could become Runkendal's execution knight again. Put it away and attack. My dead colleagues are waiting for you in the underworld. Youngest division. You retreat immediately and move to another area. If possible, retreat to where Lord Hito is. There are a total of 4 Knights of Chaos standing in front of Luton. Although the numbers were smaller than the Luton side, they were already not enough for the youngest division to handle. Luton is trying to somehow give the youngest division time to escape. However, 3 black robes were already coming out of the crack on the youngest division side. It's been a while, Jean Runkendal's bastards. You haven't forgotten our voices, right? Brother Kazan Romero Haas? Kazan Romero and Miles Haas Lima Haas. Cadets from the intermediate class who were part of Mu and Anne's faction. They were the ones who went on an intermediate class mission with Jean but were abandoned by Mu and Anne and kicked out of the family. When the 3 were kicked out, none of the intermediate class cadets felt sorry. It was because of the evil deeds they had done with Mu and Anne on their backs during the intermediate class. I would be funny now, but you will soon be in the same situation as me. We are different from purebloods. No matter how hard you try, you're just a dog, and this is what happens in the end. Take care. What Kazan Romero said as he left the cadet camp. Wow, I didn't expect to run into those bastards here. After being abandoned by the Mu. Cleek, it looks like you crawled back into the Garden of Rotten Swords, right? Well, the Garden of Swords is a perfect stage for scum like you. The youngest division reorganized its ranks and glared at the Kazan group. However, Mesa decided that Luton's orders took precedence. Only me and Velop Scut remained to deal with them. The rest should retreat and report the situation to the rear, otherwise we will not be able to save Lord Luton. A fight between those who are polluting Runkendal and those who want to reclaim Runkendal. The former had an overwhelming advantage. The youngest division retreated under Mesa's command, and the remainder conducted a checkup to prevent the enemy from pursuing them. In that way, new battles were taking place all over the battlefield. Most of them were fights between Runkendals and corrupted Runkendals, such as Jean Dyfus Mary, the Prophet Tana brothers, the Mu siblings, the youngest division, and the Knights of Chaos. However, on the other side of the youngest division, a confrontation between the Empire's former Special Lease and the current Special Lease was beginning. Kayak! Alyssa was thrown by something and screamed. Alyssa Badger, former Special Lease Team 2 member and Imperial traitor. I will punish you in the name of the great Vimant Imperial family. Codename, Latz, former head of Team 3 of the Beamant Special Lease Unit. He had already blended into the battlefield and was aiming his sword at the fallen Alyssa. Although the mask covered his face, Alyssa saw the curved sword and recognized him as Rats. Codename Rats, Vimant Special Lease Team 3 leader. I heard he was maimed in the Gaypan Islands. There's no way the Imperial family used numerous sacred items for a special lease or something like that. It looks like he's become a demon. As Alyssa said, Rats underwent main surgery by Amir Beamant after all of his tendons were severed in the Gaifa Islands. And after Amir Beamant collapsed, all the technology and manpower he had at the time were transferred to the current Imperial family led by Aaron Beamant. In other words, it wasn't just Latz who was blocking Alyssa now. Special Lease Team 4 Leader Chris, Special Team Magic Bureau 1 Team 3 Leader V. These people, along with the specially appointed Majan troops, were surrounding Alyssa. Mutu's Alyssa? I heard that he was treated as a legend before he turned his back on Casimir and the Empire. Please thank the Imperial family. Considering the merits of the time, I was ordered to handle it as painlessly as possible. Alyssa also possessed more than 8-star military power, but it was far from enough to deal with them all. However, Alyssa took a stance with calm eyes. If they really wanted me to die painlessly, it would not be because of my merits, but because they are afraid of Confucius Jin's retaliation in the future. And how many people of the Empire have been captured here, and your goal is not to save them but to eliminate me? You should feel ashamed. How can civilians who are not loyal to the Imperial family be called subjects of the Empire? Alyssa Badger. Anyway, I will listen carefully to your will and remember it. Alyssa rushed forward first and threw out her fist. The ore-engulfed gauntlet and the curved sword collided, causing wind pressure, but the battle with Ratsu did not last long. This was because the pressure from Chris V and the mine unit continued. As soon as they joined in, Alyssa was put on the defensive. I felt like I couldn't last even 5 minutes. Indeed, for the first time in a long time, she was feeling the danger of death. Was I also a member of the Empire's special forces to my core? For some reason, the first thing that came to mind was neither my family nor my colleagues, even though I was afraid that I might be killed soon. They were the Empire's civilians waiting for rescue right here in Rickalton. Alyssa's mind was disturbed by the fact that if she died, the number of people who would be able to return alive would decrease. Although he left the Empire with Casimir a long time ago, and has now established a kingdom in Tychon, her heart for the land and people called Empire was still like shining steel. From the time of the special lease, her loyalty was always directed not to the Imperial family but to the Empire itself. Defense Captain. The moment Alyssa rolled on the floor, once more someone broke through the demon troops and stood in front of her who had fallen. It was Kazan. Fortunately, someone nearby immediately came to help. The demons appeared to hesitate due to Kazan's poisonous dance. Kazan. Since we have sowed poison, Lord Quicantle or Lord Hito will recognize us and provide support. Wow. Kazan took out a piece of poison from his pocket and bit into it. It was judged that even if life was at stake, it was impossible to deal with demons without strengthening them through poison. Kazan. That's too hasty. It's noisy. If the position were the opposite, wouldn't you have done the same anyway? The same goes for other colleagues. So let's come to our senses and fight. The demons were coming inside one by one, clearing away their poisonous dances. However, unlike before, they could not easily threaten the two people. Kazan's entire body was extremely toxic right now. Even if it was a demon, if it was hit by Kazan's poison, it would inevitably take a considerable amount of time to regenerate. And if you get the chance, just leave me and get out. In this state, it's much easier and more effective to fight alone. And I can escape as much as I want using poison. Those guys won't be able to chase you beyond a certain range. Alyssa nodded heavily. Everyone was engaged in a life-or-death struggle. It was so simple for the evil spirit to kidnap tens of thousands of innocent people, but sending them back home required mission and determination. A big fight started right after Lady Mary went to the outer castle. Judging by the way the Aurors are spreading, it is highly likely that the remaining beast god riders have appeared. Moreover, it looks like a battle took place on the side where Lord Luton and the youngest division are located, as well as in Sir Alyssa's area. Gilly. She was overcoming the advancing giant beasts and rescuing prisoners while inferring the general situation of the battlefield. Since it was an area close to the Tawna brothers, there were no living prisoners left in Gillis area. Now we had to go back to the rear and continue the rescue. On the way back, it was necessary to inspect the area where the battle took place and provide support. Lord Luton is too far. Moreover, since Mr. Kazan's solo dance has spread to Lord Alyssa, the situation must be even more urgent. Quickly go there and apply. The moment you think about it and try to move. Suddenly a man appeared in front of Gilly. He was wearing black armor symbolizing the Black Knight, but was not wearing a helmet. And he was someone Gilly knew very well. Dox. Brother? Dox McLaurin. The Black Knight of the family and the eldest son of the McLaurin family, who left Tychon with orders from Jean to investigate Rickalton, and has not yet been contacted. He was looking at Gilly with dark eyes filled with confusion. Jindo Gillido. To some extent, I expected it. Perhaps Dox would have already died after visiting Rickalton. Or even if he had just returned to the Garden of Swords instead of going to Rickalton at the time, I thought there was a high possibility that Dox would have been punished by Rosa. Gilly in particular wanted to believe that. The last thing he wanted to do was see Dox pointing his claws at Jean, immersed in confusion like the other traitors. But in the end it ended up like this. Don't call me that, you lowly monster. My heart is pounding. Gilly's heart was beating like crazy. Dox had already taken out his black claw and was aiming it at Gilly. I had to come to my senses. Although it is tainted by chaos, the opponent is the Black Knight. Unlike Gilly, who has lived as Jin's nanny, she is a martial artist who is trained in various fields throughout her life. Dox's claws were firmly fixed while Gilly's claws were trembling. "Stop it, brother. You keep calling me that. Are you going to listen to me if I tear your mouth open?" Sigh dash. Along with the sound of the wind tearing, 3 scars were left on Gilly's left cheek. If the reaction had been even a little late, the entire left side of his face would have been torn off. Oh, but Gilly is Gilly. It must have been a long time since I stopped training, but I can't believe I'm avoiding this. Why did you give in to chaos? No, it was definitely not my brother's will. It must have been forced by an evil spirit or a prophet. It's not too late, brother. Ha, it's not too late. As long as there is no physical deformation, you can come back as a purifier. It means you have a chance, so please stop and come to your senses. TSK. You're the same as when you were young. I still mistakenly believe that you are in a position to show me mercy like you did back then. I was never in a position to show mercy to my brother. Both when I was young and now. Okay? So what were the many looks of sympathy that were looking down on me back then? Sometimes I lost on purpose as if it was a joke. Dox, steeped in chaos, was addicted to the inferiority complex and hatred he had towards Gilly in the past. One day the low-income person his father brought in surpassed him, even after less than a year had passed since he started training. From then on, Dox was never able to defeat Gilly until she became Runkendall's nanny and left the family. That was something that even the head of the McLaurin family, who brought Gilly in at the time, did not expect. He saw Gilly by chance and decided that he was just an excellent martial artist, so he brought him in to become Dox's practice partner and shadow. From then on, the McLaurin family had an uncomfortable time for everyone for a while. The ones that should be blooming are the Doxes, but instead only the Gillys were in full bloom. Gilly's growth was known to the outside world so quickly that McLaurin was unable to deal with her. Naturally, Gilly became isolated within the family. Dogs became more and more crazy and began to attack Gilly, and she did not resist. Still, he feels that the only reason he survived out of the slums was because he was adopted by McLaurin. Still, he was grateful to the people in his family who were very good to him during the first year. Still, he hopes that one day he will become a member of the family and get along well with everyone. Above all, Gilly didn't really hate Dox for being cruel to him. She was a person who could never be cruel to someone she had given her heart to. Runkendall recognized Gilly's temperament and hired her as Jin's nanny. Pity? I just wanted to become closer to my brother. Because I was young and dull, I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until later that I realized that my actions back then had hurt my brother. I was going to apologize sometime if I had the chance. It's an apology, so there's no need for that. Because you were just stronger than me. However, unlike you, I am a mean person, and I have no intention of showing you mercy right now. You die here today. With the people you love. As the dogs began to attack again, Gilly's shaking eyes gradually turned cold. Despair. If he died here, Jin would definitely despair uncontrollably. So I had to cut down Dox somehow. Even if it meant putting him in despair, he had to stop Jin from suffering. Because she is Jin's nanny. I can't help it. I will tell you again why your brother could not defeat me even once during those times. If Gilly had continued to train as a knight of McLaurin instead of becoming Runkendall's nanny, she would definitely have been able to keep her word. But Dox is the Black Knight. Even though his potential was much lower than that of Gilly, and he is currently in a corrupted state of marriage. The weight of the black helmet he wore did not become lighter. Moreover, the Prophet had been very involved in Dox's corruption. He did not lose the status he had built up as a warrior, but degraded him just enough to be consumed by hatred and madness. In other words, the current Dox was able to show its full potential. How dare a nanny? That's ridiculous, Gilly. Those arrogant things should have been said back then. After you left the family, I went through countless hardships and became stronger. It was the same even after wearing the black helmet. Chiang dash. Tisk. Dox's claw struck Gilly. Although he was able to block, Gilly couldn't dare to try a power fight. I gritted my teeth as the pain felt like my entire wrist was falling off. Every time I blocked a Dox attack, my entire bone was shaking. However, Gilly's face was contorted in pain, but she maintained her posture and fixed her eyes on Dox. Chloe, who was no longer trembling, had a strange aura forming on her. It's not bad considering I've had such a comfortable time. Dog's one-sided attacks continued without stopping. Gilly had to exert all her might at every moment, but Dox was relaxed as if dealing with a child. Power speed experience. There wasn't a single area where Gilly could beat Dox right now. He knew best that the words he spoke confidently were only intended to provoke Dogs even a little and were unrealistic. That's it. What on earth are you trying to tell me? Crack. Immediately after Dox finished speaking, Gilly heard the sound of his left wrist being twisted. While their claws were tangling, Dox suddenly broke Gilly's balance and struck his wrist with his elbow. Kayak! Gilly groaned and hurriedly walked to the left. However, Dox did not give her a chance to escape and attacked the same spot again. Once again, the crushed bone sharply pierced the inside of my skin. This is my first time hearing you scream. Ha, so are you satisfied? No, I'm disappointed. Still, if you were that monster like Gilly, no matter how rusted you were, wouldn't there still be something great about you? I had that thought. I am not a monster, I am just an ordinary person. The monster is my brother. No, it must be the people who made him like this. But it breaks too easily. To the point of futility. Dox stopped attacking. Gilly took advantage of the gap and quickly wrapped the broken wrist with a bandage. I couldn't wrap it well because I was conscious of the poison. Cold sweat broke out all over my body and my breathing was becoming increasingly difficult. Ha! Dox let out a long sigh. The Gilly he remembered was nowhere to be seen in that frail appearance. Soon Dox took something out of his arms and threw it in front of Gilly. Gilly flinched and tried to fight back when he saw that what had fallen to the ground was a black pill. What is it? They say it is a pill made by a prophet. If I eat this, will I become like my brother? Your body temporarily recovers and your energy explodes. Of course, there is little chance of you defeating me even if you swallow Handan, but wouldn't it be better than dying like this? More than anything, I want to see you again at least once. Your old self. Gilly trampled on Handan as if it wasn't worth worrying about. No need. It's a strange thing. When Maclock was praised as the greatest genius, he acted as if he had no pride, but now he is stubborn even when he is on the verge of death. Gilly took a breath and aimed the claw at Dox again. At that time, the reason I stayed quiet even though I was hated and ostracized by my family was because I took on the surname McLaurin. It's not that I don't have pride. You have never been McLaurin. No matter what my family and brother thought of me, I never once forgot that I was McLaurin. Every sword I have was something I learned from McLaurin, and all the happiness I have gained in life was obtained from McLaurin. That's why Gilly never told Jean and his colleagues about his past as McLaurin. I'm sorry, Master. Why are you sorry? My family is being disrespectful to you. That's probably because of me. It's okay, Gilly has nothing to be sorry about. Don't worry, I won't have any particularly hard feelings toward McLaurin because of this. Gilly even did not send an envoy when Jean became the standard-bearer and rudely apologized on behalf of the military McLaurin, and even when Dox was captured by Jean, he was worried that Master Hangyo would harm him. Of course, Gilly suffered many wounds during his time at McLaurin. However, he thought that all the pain could not even be compared to what he had gained by escaping the slums. Jean Murakin and the friends they have gained through adventures together since their days as preliminary jockeys. So to speak, family. I never would have had it without McLaurin. The aura on Gilly's claws was getting thicker. Are you saying you want to win the game right away? Okay, I'll wait. Do you remember? This is the decisive battle of the family that my brother wanted to learn so much about. McLaurin Type 66. It's a pretty nice sword. I think you still think of Type 66 as the sword made by the matriarch. Dox's eyes narrowed. Could it be that it was you and not your father? Yes, it is said to be a sword designed by the head of the family, but it is actually a technique I first thought of when I was 17. Therefore, since I am the only one who knows the method of Type 66, the head of the family did not succeed in the end. My father must have felt inferior to you just like me. But it's a shame I shouldn't have swallowed Handan. That broken arm wouldn't be able to handle Type 66. Anyway, show me. I will break it head-on. As Dox raised his claw and prepared to attack, Gilly lowered his stance. It was a pose that Dox had practiced millions of times throughout his youth. Rush, acceleration, and subsequent attacks. A sword with a simple structure but extremely difficult center distribution. I made this for the first time when I was 17. Gilly then roared with enthusiasm and rushed towards Dox. If the technique had ended before it started, once Type 66 had begun, even Dox had no choice but to hand over leadership to Gilly for a while. However, Dox was perfectly hitting Gilly's claws. Even if I didn't know anything about Type 66, the only thing I would have done was a few minor scars, but since it was such a familiar sword, there was nothing to say. Here, the moment of blocking or dodging the bottom of the triple strike rotation and position change. Type 66 was now a technique that Dox had mastered perfectly. Therefore, even though Gilly was attacked one-sidedly, he was suffering even greater damage. Aura reflux is occurring due to excessive use of a damaged body. It's a sword that naturally causes severe reflux, so it's amazing that you can handle it this far with a shattered arm. Is this the last time? If Gilly had really created Type 66, only the ending would have been different. The ending of Type 66 that Dox knew was avoidance. This is because if the opponent is still alive even after Type 66's consecutive attacks are completed, they must retreat. Therefore, Type 66 was a close call. You have to endure the reflux and explode the aura to push the opponent, and if you can't break them, you have to run away in that state. This was the most difficult point for Dox to understand while learning Type 66. Therefore, when Dox usually used Type 66, he would deliberately unfold only about 70% of the type. Although the Type 66 was clearly an excellent sword, it had its limitations, including the risk of backflow. For this reason, Dox has believed that Type 66's great power lies in aura control that completely excludes reflux. It is said that the end of Type 66 is to reach a point where there is no risk of regurgitation no matter when and when it is fully unfolded. Can you lower your posture here once more? The moment Dox anticipated the final blow, Gilly lowered his stance once more and returned to the first stance of Type 66. Gilly then planted both claws into the ground and raised his upper body like a roaring beast. At that very moment, Dox found out what the true ending of Type 66 was. It was a suicide bomber. That's why Type 66 was so extreme. All the auras flowing back inside Gilly's body were instantly converging on the claw blade embedded in the ground. Like the volcanoes of Runkendal. McLaurin Type 66. Gilly McLaurin. When he first thought of Type 66 at the age of 17, he named the sword after himself. And if there came a day when I was no longer ostracized by my family, and when I became closer to Dox, I planned to let them know. Type 66 was created to become Dox's shadow. It was made in preparation for the day when the moment comes when you have to die to save him. Therefore, Dox completely misunderstood the completion of Type 66. In order to completely finish Gilly McLaurin, I had to learn how to use, rather than control the aura reflux to avoid it. Rather, the end of Type 66 is to bring the reflux to the end and explode it all at once. But now Gilly had no intention of dying for Dox. Even though she was hated so much, she still had affection for McLaurin and Dox, but the only people she could give her life to now were Master and Murakan's colleagues. The energy is quite fierce, but there is no need to avoid it. The moment it explodes, the only person who dies is you. This time my brother won in the end. No, to be exact, this time too, I guess. If he had swallowed the horn I gave him, it would have been a bit burdensome. Squeak dash. Suddenly Dox's side was cut and spirit welled up like a stream of blood. Someone who had just infiltrated the battlefield cut down Dox. There are not many people in this world who can pull off such a perfect surprise attack against the Black Knight. This black meat tried to kill our strawberry pie? Jonah Runkendal. Gilly had been considering supporting the unknown since the first time Type 66 was deployed. By now, assuming that Nameless had infiltrated the ground separately from Kinslow, it would be time to arrive. Yona instantly knocked Dox down and plunged his sword into his chest. Since Owl and Jonah together attacked Dox, they had no choice but to be defeated in an instant. Gasp! Dox, who slumped forward, saw Gilly kneeling on the ground with her claws in place. There was still no trace of resentment in her eyes. Likewise, there was no sense of victory, just blank and gloomy eyes, an expression that is all too familiar to dogs. Finally, Dox was able to realize why Gilly always had that kind of face. It meant, "I didn't want to hurt you. It's not strawberry meat, it's strawberry pie. Are you okay?" Owl immediately looked at Gilly. Although the reflux was severe, it was not enough to cause immediate death. He immediately took out the poison and medicine from his arms and calmed Gilly's energy. Purification, purification. Dogs, come. Owl, it will never be possible for this person to die. Arjun is sad. I have to kill this first. Jonah, stop. He is someone who can still be restored with a purifier. Can't we just kill him? Dox is a Black Knight who was sent here on a mission by Jean himself. Even if the fall was done voluntarily, and not by someone else's will, it is right for the person to be punished while he or she is of sound mind. What an annoying story. How would you like strawberry pie? It would be better to just ignore Owl's orders and do as you say. After all, it would be better to kill, right? Because I tried to kill you. No, Murakan, sir. Gilly answered with the last of his strength. Because his consciousness was so dim and his name was Strawberry Pie, he almost mistaken Yona for Murakan. Because it was painful and difficult, I missed him very much. Hi, I'm Jonah. Jonah pulled out the death that was stuck in Dox's body, as if there was nothing he could do. Dox flinched and appeared to be trying to recover, but Owl deliberately spilled poison on the affected area to prevent physical deformation in the process. Evacuate Bison, Gilly and the Black Knight to Ziffel's fleet. Gilly in particular needs urgent treatment. All right. As soon as he heard those words, Gilly lost consciousness. The last time she saw it, the sky behind the battlefield was filled with Zippel fleets approaching the battlefield. Finally, one by one, temporary allies are arriving. Kingelo was still there, but the arrival of Jeep's fleet instantly changed the atmosphere of the battlefield. The 3rd and 4th fleets must prioritize securing prisoners. The 5th fleet transports the prisoners gathered at the rendezvous point to the Cosmos fleet. Everything else should focus on eliminating the giant monsters, but artillery fire is prohibited in areas where many prisoners remain. The crushing cannon should only be used against monsters that do not take prisoners. Yes, Sagaju. The contract wizards of the 1st Ghost Troop and the 1st Magic Tower should work in conjunction with the dragons and assist the Black King Leader and Julian to rescue the prisoners hanging from the monster's head. Under Baradin's command, the fleet began to disperse. The giant beasts were only aware of Hito's attack the entire time, but when the fleet's attack was suddenly added, they appeared flustered. The rescue operation was finally getting closer to what the Temporary Alliance had originally planned. The wind of reversal began to flow in each fight that took place throughout the battlefield. Wow! A huge flash of light struck one side of the battlefield like a giant spear. Huron's Emperor Sword's secret technique. One sky strike. Alyssa and Kazan were on the side fighting. In an instant the earth shook and a shock wave spread, and Alyssa and Kazan were soon able to see the back of Dante standing in front of them. Queen Alyssa. Kazan. Are you okay? Your appearance couldn't be more appropriate, Sir Dante. It was a car that was underpowered. Dante. Huron, the real Imperial Sword is different from the Beamant Special Forces that had been attacking the two people. He glared at Rats and other special team leaders and the mine unit as if he were going to tear them to shreds at any moment. The Special Forces members did not even dare to aim their swords at Dante properly. The Special Forces members who became demons were clearly very strong men, but Dante was a warrior of a completely different class from them. Numerical superiority had no meaning in front of the one who inherited the name of Jiamwang. Dozens of demons who had already rushed into the sky were scattered in 6 groups. First, you turned a blind eye even when you saw the people of the Empire dying. Second, he attempted to assassinate Queen Tychon. Third, he chose to abandon the Empire and humanity and become a dog for the Imperial family and evil spirits. I will personally carry out the execution for that crime. The moment Dante's eyes looked, Murderous V's head fell to the ground. The special team leaders could not properly recognize the moment Dante's sword moved. At the same time, a blue sky flash swept in all directions, slaughtering the demon troops. Chris's limbs were cut off in an instant, and he rolled around on the floor. At least rats dodged Rashid's sword a few times, but that was all. Squeak, squeak. Suddenly Ratsu's right hand holding the curved sword fell to the floor. I couldn't see it at all. This couldn't have been Halen's sword, Emperor Season, symbolizing the intangible sword Ron. Your masters will soon be sent to hell too, so go first and wait for them. Dante's sword had already reached that area. A scene of murder ensued, with the intangible sword slaughtering demons like crazy with a flash in the sky. No matter how great the demons' regenerative abilities were, they could not survive Dante. Meanwhile, the battlefield of Luton and the youngest division was covered in white cold. Cirrus Endorma, the Lord of the Big Palace, is leading the 7 swords of the Big Palace and unleashing the power of Manbing. Sir Luton Furman. Cirrus extended his hand to Luton, who was on the defensive and kneeling on one knee. Luton momentarily mistook the hand for Talaris's. In the past, Luton and the Execution Knights often attacked Talaris and were overpowered, and each time she held out her hand to tell them to get up, just like Cirrus does now. Whoa, Sagungju. After Kyung became a member of Taiken, my mother often felt bitter. You said you didn't visit the secret palace when you were purged, but you should have looked first. Yeah, I know. You can't blame me. I wonder if there was someone who came to the secret palace to ask for help after surviving. That's right. We didn't come to you because we didn't think you had anything to do with this. My group members and I lived a life without anyone by our side, so you were the closest, but that wasn't objectively special. To you, we were just a passing relationship. A conversation with Talaris after Luton attacked Taiken and was subdued by Jean. From that day on, Talaris regretted not taking care of the Luton group. So I sometimes talk to Cirrus about them. I see. We are currently in an operation, so of course we have to support Lord Luton, but our concubine would have stepped in to help even if the Lord was in trouble due to personal problems. Kyung had a deep relationship with his mother. Luton raised his head and looked at Cirrus' profile. The friendship that Talaris had had for the Luton group in his youth was reflected in his face. So once your mother's treatment is over, please directly tell her to forget about what happened. It was quite annoying when he brought up the story when I said he only drank alcohol. I understand, Sagungju. With the appearance of Cirrus, the Black Sword Society was unable to continue its attack carelessly. Although it was still clearly inferior to Talaris in its prime, a chill that could not be called transcendental was oppressing the Black Sword Society. Ryu, you go over there and help Jin's knights. No, I guess that's not necessary. Velop and Mesa Scut approached Luton's side. They had just beaten Kazan Romero and the Haas brothers and had come to Luton's aid. In addition, behind them, a one-armed soldier and the youngest division that had fallen to the rear were seen returning. The one-armed warrior was Black Knight Mon. While the Mesa group was fighting, they had requested support from Mon, who was rescuing prisoners nearby. The 4 members of the Black Sword Society, who were instantly outnumbered, kept watching. Just having Cirrus and the 7 swords of the secret palace come was a burden, but now that they had come to Mon, there was no hope. I think it would be a good idea for Lord Mon to go to the outer castle with Jin's knights for support. As Cirrus spoke, Mon immediately left with Luton and the youngest division. Then the Black Sword Society looked relieved and Cirrus let out a chuckle. Why? Without Sir Mon, what do you think would be worth doing against the 7 swords of the secret palace? You bastards! As soon as I finished speaking, the chill emanating from the full ice began to intensify. The members of the Black Sword Society dared to shout, "You are such a bully," but they hastily closed their mouths. The chill was instantly blocking my airway. From now on, I will personally tell you what it is like to die while shivering in the hellish cold. As the cold, like a thick fog, completely engulfed the area, the 8 black blades of the big palace quietly pierced their lungs along with the cold. Kiki, kek. He's not dead. Near the outer castle, Brother Tana was standing up unsteadily. Mu Enon frowned as they watched the Tana brothers, who should have already fallen 10 times, get up again. Wow, you are really you too, Mu, and even though they are strengthened by chaos, they can't finish us off. Aren't you embarrassed? If it weren't for the chaos, you would have already fallen into our hands. You are definitely below us. I don't even know why I was scared all this time. Sister Mu gritted her teeth. The sister's pride was so damaged by Brother Tana's unexpected outburst. However, the Tana brothers were now truly at their limit. There was no strength left to counter Sister Mu's next attack. However, Sister Mu's blow did not kill her brother. Jockeys, we are here. Bell up Mesa, you guys. 10 riders, 11 riders. You held up well. It was because the youngest division and Mon joined the fight at the right time. Even while the Tana brothers were struggling, they were polite to Mon. The one-armed bastard is making a fuss about being a Black Knight. It's better. Let's all fight together. I will send you all to the afterlife. I was already getting angry. Sister Mu, on the other hand, showered criticism on Mon. The 10 and 11 riders here are real Runkendels who resisted until the end when the evil spirit rebelled. However, you, the former 89 riders, were the first to betray Runkendel. Mon aimed his sword at Mu and An. Mu and An felt unexpected pressure from that alone. The black helmet of the real Black Knight was not a weight that someone like them could bear, even if he lost an arm. Do you know why your family ranked Black Knights higher than horsemen? You're putting forward a famous and worthless old law. The world has changed. Mother's Runkendel no longer treats the Black Knights specially. It's not just about merit. This is to guide those who are lacking like you and to give them the authority to get rid of them if they do not improve. Therefore from now on I will kill you both. Not as Rosa but as the Black Knight of Matriarch Soren Runkendel and Sir Jean Runkendel. After talking like that, Mon's eyes were shining inside his black helmet. The moment Mon's sword began to put pressure on Sister Mu and shake the entire outer castle, Mary stopped for a moment and looked back. It is at least the energy of a Black Knight-level warrior. Has Lord Mon come to support the Tana guys? There was more gunfire, and along with it I felt that the vibrations being transmitted to my inner body became more intense. It was evidence that reinforcements from the temporary alliance had arrived. So Mary decided that it would be better to stop infiltrating, wait for our troops to arrive, and then move along. There was no reason to take the risk. Until now it was necessary to find out the internal situation first, even if it was excessive, but now if he made a mistake on his own it would actually be a nuisance to his allies. Prisoners trapped in the castle, the Prophet Tana brothers and their allies fight to the death. Jean and Dyfus are known to have moved somewhere and started a fight. There were countless factors that made her anxious, but Mary calmly turned around. The intention is to go to the entrance of the castle and wait for our allies. However, Mary soon wrapped her aura around the poisonous snake and sighed. Step by step, I saw a black robe approaching from the back of the hallway. Yeah, there's no way it's going to go as planned. Elena, Noah Prophet. As expected, you are coming to meet me. Well, the 7 horsemen of the family came to visit Rick Alton. As the Lord, it would be right for me to come out in person, right? Swak dash. The poisonous snake stretched forward like a whip and swept Elena away. Are you welcome? I can't reach it. As if cutting water, Elena only fluttered for a moment and was not hit at all. It was the same even if I attacked again. In what country is it the law to say that you are being polite while making jokes like this? Is it a country of chaos? Elena waved her hand and smiled. No, really, I prepared a lot for you. So don't be too angry. You will definitely be surprised. TSK. Hey Prophet. All of our allies have already been crushed outside. Moreover, we know that the evil spirit is unable to move and the 4 horsemen are said to be trying to lure Jean into a fight. You pretend to be relaxed, but I can see it all. Are you afraid that things will go wrong? Does it look like that? Surely your original plan was to prevent the allies from reaching this castle at all. But they eventually arrived, albeit later than expected, and you set up an illusion to be safe. Unfortunately, you pose no threat to me. So the illusion of safety is your overconfidence. This is not a simple illusion. Are you going to send out more giant beasts? Or are you going to set off a trap and kill me now? If you have anything prepared, do it. You guys will definitely lose today. If I want to kill you, there's no need to use a trap. Then why don't you come forward and fight me? There is someone else who will kill you. What? The 12th horseman, Jean Runkendel, will die by his hands. Mary lets out a laugh. Jean is different from other guys. No matter what happens, that guy like Sister Mu, who was outside like other chaos armies, like Rosa, like the Four Horsemen, will never become corrupted. How special he is and how strong he is. You guys can't even imagine. Lord Dyfus says the same thing. Hu to you and the Fourth Horseman and the 12th Horseman should have been our people, not trash like Joshua. Even though he was corrupted, it seems he hasn't completely lost his senses. The Fourth Horseman probably knows that he cannot defeat Jean. The youngest is not the one to be defeated by you or the Four Horsemen. If you want to catch that guy, you'll have to bring in an evil spirit, and even that will ultimately fail. Then why did Sir Deepoos lure the 12 horsemen separately even though he knew he would lose? It must be a ploy to buy time until the evil body can move. Just like you guys have been doing this whole time. That's a half-correct answer. 7 horsemen. Before today's battle begins, I will tell you what Sir Dyfus ordered me. Even if I lose, create a game in which Runkendal does not lose. Elena continued talking and took off her hood. The 12 horsemen do not have to accept chaos to harm you. Lord Dyfus never even considered corrupting him in the first place. Instead, like this, the moment Elena said that, Mary hurriedly took steps and swung the poisonous snake. This was because suddenly a huge energy came out of the air and attacked him. It was brain power. It is also a power that clearly reflects Jin's unique and powerful power. Excluding the Ming Dynasty, Jin was the only human who could handle this type of brain energy. Even that was just the beginning. Before I knew it, brain energy was spreading everywhere. No matter how many times I checked, it was clearly Jin's energy. I will kill you without you even knowing. I've taken steps to ensure that all the energy wasted while fighting Lord Dyfus hits this spot right now. Me and Sir Deepoos together. Would you say it is a variation of the power of dimensional movement? Big. Mary, who had been pushed out by brain power, gritted her teeth. As you said, when the matriarch is away, it's not easy for us to gain the upper hand in a firefight, right? So I prepared really carefully. Even if the 12 horsemen do not become corrupted, falling into the abyss of despair is inevitable. As Mary said, Jean never corrupts. Dyfus recognized this fact early on and acknowledged that he could not defeat Eternal while still being injured. That's why Diffuse took a completely different approach. Also, as everyone knows, excluding the evil spirit, the current Jean was practically the strongest. Even a warrior like Mary could barely last a few minutes if she fought Jean properly. Jin's attack was falling into Rickleton's defense. Only a few seconds had passed, but the hallway where Mary was standing was already destroyed beyond recognition. How is this possible? There was no time to worry about that. It felt like a turbid torrent was rushing through my head. Of course, not a single one of her allies, including Mary, expected this to happen. Yourself die. And that too through the strength of the youngest. Even if that were to happen, Mary had no intention of blaming Jean, but the weight of despair that Jean would have to bear would be indescribable. Besides, not only will I die, but if this continues, my other colleagues will also be affected by the youngest's energy. Right now, Jin's energy was only spreading towards my inner side. However, it is unknown how long its scope will be limited to tolerance. If Jin's energy spreads to the outer walls and the battlefield, not only were tens of thousands of prisoners exterminated, but the deaths among our soldiers continued to increase. Jean will hear all about it after the battle is over. No matter how strong the youngest person is, if something like that happens, collapses. It had no choice but to collapse. No human being could have lived safely after experiencing something like that. Those who survived, especially his colleagues, will tell you that it is not Jin's fault. Jean would never think like that. Whoops whoops. PZZZZZZZT-. Some of the thunder energy that destroyed the 9 swords of the 2 gods struck down Mary. I managed to throw it away, but my collarbone was broken and hot blood burst out from my throat. Elena licked her lips with her tongue, as if she was very satisfied with the sight. What do you think? You can still win? Do you think I'm worried that things will go wrong? I am a prophet. What I say will eventually come true. Today, Jean Runkendal will kill a lot of people. I was hit. Mary had no choice but to admit that fact. There was no apparent breakthrough. All she could do was swat away the brain energy. But for some reason, Mary felt that the fear and worry about Jean that had filled her mind were suddenly washed away. It's like the moment when religious people encounter the voice of God in a desperate moment. Giant beings sometimes give unfounded beliefs at times like this. Mary was realizing that she had been treating her youngest child that way. Jean was that kind of person not only to himself but to his family and all of Tychon's colleagues. You are quite strong too. How many times have you already defeated these fierce forces? Be strong. The more miserable the traces left, the better. Yes, just like you said, this is a real crisis, but wow. Mary rolled on the floor once more and vomited blood. It's strange. I don't think the youngest will continue to fall for this trick. The prophet's eyes narrowed. Mary's eyes, which had suddenly darkened in despair, were once again retaining light. As a prophet, no matter how you look at it, Mary was not in a situation where she could have any hope. Ah, did you eventually go crazy facing this kind of death? That's a look that only suits common weak humans. No, it's just, I still can't picture Jean being harmed by you guys. And we are not a group of poor prophets like you, but a group of recorders. By now our recorder will have smelled something unpleasant, and one of his colleagues will have gone to inform Jean. Yes. Either way, soon your entire body will be torn apart by the energy of the 12 horsemen. I guess all I can do is endure it 2 more times. Mary stood up, swatting away her brain energy. His legs were shaking as if he would collapse at any moment, but the poisonous snake was shining fiercely. If you really think so, would you like to make a bet with me? I'm betting that no one will die from Jin's energy. Twice? You can block it 10 or 20 times. So if you want to see me die, come out yourself. Because I will never end up in Jin's energy. Mary continued talking and glared at Alina. The battlefield between Jean and Dyphus outside Rickalton. The wilderness was breaking apart. Like a gigantic storm, the thunderous energy that spread from Sigmund, the Sword of Lightning, swept through the entire sky and earth. A considerable amount of time has already passed since the 2 people teleported away from Rickalton Castle. Even though the battle was so intense that the entire terrain of the wilderness was distorted, there were still no significant injuries to the 2 men. They are unable to strike a decisive blow against each other. Jean was the one wasting more energy. This was because while Deepooz could easily hit and run away by flying, Jean had to spread his brain energy to the point where he could control the entire battlefield to put pressure on him. However, even though Jean was wasting his power, it did not mean he was lacking. On the contrary, Deepooz was impressed as he pushed out the brain energy, which was becoming more and more intense as time went by. You have this kind of power without having been given power like me. I understand why you rebelled against your mother. You probably didn't feel the need, Dyphus said as he dodged the thunderbolt. But not everyone can do it like you. Jean didn't answer but just watched the thunderbolt disappear somewhere before it struck the ground. It's not the first time this has happened. Continuing from before, my attacks that the 4th horseman dodged or parried are disappearing. At first Jean didn't even notice. Because the attack was so intense, there was no time to even check the afterimage of the sword that was thrown. However, the 2 men's battle was now losing balance. The taut line was pulled slightly toward Jean. There was only one reason. This is why, even if Deepooz received some of Rose's power, he could not become stronger than Jean. Even if it was intact, the same would have happened, but since it received irreparable damage from eternalization and used teleportation excessively, the gap widened even faster. Where do my attacks that disappear like that go? Is it going to be returned to the 4th horseman in some way, or? It looks like they're worried about the guys left at Rickalton Castle. I see that you keep getting distracted even though you have just started to push me. Tisk dash. Deepooz said as he struck Bolgar. Jean raised Sigmund and fired a thunderbolt, and he was able to see that the thunderbolt that missed disappeared as well. You guys just focus. I don't think it's appropriate to fight with me if you dodge an attack afterward. Suddenly Jean recovered all the brain energy that filled the battlefield. Dyphus slowly descended and shrugged his shoulders. You have a good sense of vision. I didn't know you would already notice. If I was worried about my comrades, I would have tried to get back to Rickalton Castle somehow. I'm not going to fight like this in one place with you. Jean changes his sword. Honestly, I don't know why there is post-processing for missed attacks. But it doesn't matter now. The search war is over, so you won't have time to do things like that from now on. A pure white aura enveloped Bradamanti. The quietly shining aura gave off an atmosphere that was completely contradictory to the thunderbolt that had been violently trampling the entire wilderness. Is it okay if I leave my brain energy and spiritual energy alone, and use lower-level power? The reason Jin changed his sword was to minimize missed attacks. Because the nature of Noigi itself was too ferocious, many attacks were inevitably spilled. Also, the reason I chose Aura instead of Reiki was to save power. I'm sure he can't beat me. You are already fighting with the assumption of defeat. Jin continued to get that feeling from Deepu's. In fact, every response Deepu's made after the operation began was a tactic to buy time. Separate Jin from his colleagues, deploy illusion magic on Jeep's side, and deploy the most troops on Kinzelo's side. It was still the same now. Deepu's was dragging the fight, sluggishly dealing with the wasted attacks. Jin came to the conclusion that all of his actions were to arrange for Rose's participation in the war. Another piece of evidence was Orgel and Cirrus. Even though it's been a while since Jin left the group, there's still no news from our allies with teleportation abilities. Currently, except for the evil spirits, there is no one in the Sword Garden camp that can handle Orgel and Kinzelo. However, the reason those with teleportation abilities are unable to find me is because Orgel is tied up somewhere. If Orgel was with the allies at Rick-Alton Castle, they would have already settled the situation and started looking for Jin. Especially with Orgel's abilities, he should have already visited Jin several times. And there was only one being in the Garden of Swords who could tie up Orgel like that. Badass Rosa. Orgel is currently unable to join the battlefield due to efforts to prevent her from participating. This was why Jin had to save his spiritual energy. After dealing with Dyphus, we need to support Orgel. Are you okay? Everything you've done so far has been like that. But that's not something Deepu's would say. My brother was a man who only fought with a sword. Although he later expressed his intention to participate in the return of the demon sword for the sake of his family, he still revered the sword the most. Because we are a sword family. So let me show you the essence of the sword family. Immediately after Jin continued his conversation, Deepu's felt the vision in front of his eyes turn completely white. What blocked his vision was Bradamanti's blade. The reaction was slow because I had become accustomed to the speed of brain power. Jin was waging a decisive battle against Runkendal at a speed that surpassed that of lightning. The sixth decisive battle of Runkendal Lightning. The decisive battle he fought during his first mission to kill Barton with Deepu's. Jin chose that sword to start with. Dyphus hurriedly took steps and spread his wings. However, at the place where he flew up, another Runkendal decisive battle plane was already falling. Runkendal third decisive battle meteor shower. There is no place to escape. Before he knew it, hundreds of swords covered the sky, cutting through the clouds and confusing Dyphus' vision. Although the rapid increase in battle speed was disconcerting, it was at a level that Deepu's could easily deal with up to this point. It was also possible to send missed attacks to Rick-Alton Castle. However, Jin knew in advance that he would not be able to afford that. This means that you have learned all of Deepu's patterns and responses in exploration battles. Jin was confident that he would push forward without giving Deepu's any time to catch his breath, let alone to deal with the attack. Just as Dyphus was about to block the 5 meteor showers and send the deflected attack to Rick-Alton, Jin had already launched his body in the twisted trajectory of the meteor shower and unfolded a new sword. The first decisive battle of the Supreme King, meteor smashing. This time, in contrast to the meteor shower, the appearance of sword energy rising from the ground continued. Unlike the real Supreme Sword that Ron wielded, the sword energy did not glow gray, but Jin had acquired the sword he had seen in the Sword Emperor's temple by modifying it to the Runkendal style. I received help from the Tushen class when training at La Perosa. When the meteor shower and the meteor destroyer collided with Dyphus at the center, one of Dyphus' wings was torn off. 2 seconds to play. No matter how fast it is 2 seconds. This was the speed that was confirmed earlier by tearing off Deepu's wings several times with the throwing weapon. However, Jin prepared the next sword even faster than that. Runkendal's 5th secret technique, light speed stab. The auras were shaking inside his body and his center of gravity was constantly distorted as he was performing multiple decisive battles at once, but Jin showed incredible strength by performing a thrust at the speed of light a little faster than 2 seconds. A beam of light pierced through Dyphus's remaining wings. For seconds for aura reflux to calm down. The reflux did explode. Jin closed the distance with Dyphus, who had fallen, calming his backflow while he regained his stance and slashed away the remaining sword energy from Meteor Shower. Deepoo's was no longer able to deal with Jin's swords that had missed because he was blocking the attack. When 4 seconds had passed, the distance between Jin and Deepoo's was 20 steps. And the reflux that exploded on Jin completely stopped progressing and Deepoo's wings were about to finish regenerating. You would have realized it by now. No matter what I do, my sword is faster than regeneration. As expected, Dyphus did not struggle to widen the distance but instead approached Jin and swung Bolgar. A huge blade soaked in chaos was falling on Jin's head. However, what Jin saw as he changed his sword was the end of this fight. I guess they just think there isn't enough time to unfold Eternal Flower. That was true. In a battle as urgent as this, even Jin cannot fully unleash eternalization. Therefore, in each battle he had to gain a very small lead and accumulate time to deploy eternalization. We had to push Dyphus one step at a time until there was a cliff behind us. Runkendal's first decisive battle, Ashsun. Among the legacies left behind by Jordan, this is the most important battle for the family. Deepoo's, who was rushing as Bradamanti was plunged into the ground, belatedly found out what kind of sword movement it was for. You have a good eye. I guess it's because of the memories of Brother Deepoo's. But it was late. The aura that had already encroached under the ground exploded, creating a huge sword energy that split the ground and sky in half. Dyphus hurriedly stepped to the side, but the sword energy of Wachin soared from that side as well. Even the fragments of aura left in the sky by the Meteor Shower and Meteor Smasher were swept away by the clean water and were crushed. Aya! The fragments of the shattered Meteor Shower pierced Deepoo's back, and the sword energy of the ashes pierced the ground with increasing ferocity and rushed into the sky. One of them was seen swallowing the newly regenerated left wing and left arm of Dyphus entirely. If it had been the right arm holding Bolgar, the battle would have ended at this point. However, the battle continues and the game is already over. Jin was sure of that. Deepoo's also went into battle assuming defeat from the beginning. Even though Deepoo's knew he would lose, he pulled Jin out of the battlefield and induced a one-on-one match. To buy time for Rosa to move. Also to make Jin despair. Jin gritted his teeth once as he thought about his intention. If I end up killing you like this, do you think I will despair? Don't be mistaken, you are the fourth horseman of evil. Me and Sister Mary have finished preparing to send Brother Deepoo's away. Immediately Jin's eyes widened and he finished his attack and swung his sword at Dyphus again. Dyphus' body was trembling in the afterimage left by Wachin. Spirits welled up like blood from the torn-off left arm and wing. From now on, the sight of two people tangling cannot be called a fight. Dyphus was cornered and barely able to swing Bolgar, and Jin constantly stabbed his blade into his gap. Every time that happened, a large hole appeared in Deepoo's body. If Deepoo's were human, he would have died more than 10 times already. Jin was using a merciless sword, as if Dyphus' body would be destroyed without leaving even a single particle behind. It's the memory of Big Deepoo's. Do you really perceive me as something different? Kwang dash. Greatsword Bolgar blocked Jin's longitudinal cut and fell to the ground. You've been saying strange things since a while ago, like you're the chaotic bastard who swallowed up your brother. I know you're excited about winning, but look at it straight ahead. I am Deepoo's Runkendal, your older brother. There is no one in the Garden of Swords who can bear the name Runkendal anymore. TSK in your position that could happen. However, it is difficult for you to keep treating me like someone else. Not only is that not true, but it's also disrespectful to others who don't bow down even when they're cornered youngest child. Suddenly the atmosphere of Deepoo's changed. The swordsmanship, which had lost its balance due to being on the defensive, quickly stabilized, and Bolgar retained the destructive power as before. Is this the last struggle? I had always kept in mind that Dyphus had some power to spare. It wasn't self-destruction, it was reinforcement. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. Even if it was a self-destruction of the size of a volcano during the decisive battle, it could be prevented, and even if Dyphus became stronger, the same would be true. But Jean soon learned that that was not the only change in Deepoo's. The great sword Bolgar began to glow with a pure white brilliance instead of its spirit. An aura exuding Runkendal's unique ferocious energy shone on Bolgar. Jean momentarily widened the distance and made eye contact with Deepoo's. He was laughing like a madman and breaking the horn on my forehead. "Do you still think I'm someone else and not your older brother?" The darkly amplified voice returned to its original tone, and the wings on its back fell to the ground like withered flowers. Instead of blood, hot red blood flowed from wounds all over the body. "Did you reverse the body transformation?" Deepoo's stood in front of Jean again, looking just like his old self. Naturally, this was something that was not included in Jin's expectations. "Answer me, youngest." "Earthly. It is inevitable that you and I will become enemies and fight. But at least you shouldn't do anything to alleviate your guilt by recognizing me as someone else." If Deepoo's had shown his old self and begged for his life, Jean would have immediately thought it was a modification to save his life. However, Deepoo's eyes, which had returned still, had the fighting will of a man ready to die. On the other hand, Jin's heart couldn't help but waver for a moment. "While you were away training at the closed palace, I had no choice but to fight a pretty tough fight as the fourth horseman of the family. With the merry guy." Dyphus said so and struck Jean with his Bolgar. Jean did not take his eyes off Deepoo's as he parried the sword strike. "No matter how many times I looked, it was Deepoo's. Once my mother accepted the chaos, the family changed in an instant. Many people, including me, tried to fight against him, but there was no way. Those who resisted mother were just chased and killed every day. But do you think I resented you back then?" Jean was unable to respond to the subsequent comments. "I didn't blame anyone. Even though the family was inevitably changing, my father's sister Luna left alone with no sign of returning, and even my mother who oppressed us at the time. Why would you do that?" "That's because I thought it was all a result of my weakness." "So what are you saying?" "But throughout the fight you resented and hated me, recognizing that I am not Deepoo's Runkendal but a monster of chaos. Am I not myself who accepted chaos from you? Are you saying that this is a problem you can decide? Joshua is Joshua even though he is tainted by chaos, but am I no longer Dyphus? Don't you dare compare that bastard with Brother Deepoo's. You're still ignoring me. Jean is the youngest. Let me tell you one thing. Sharing mother's power is impossible without self-will. Even if my mother tried to force me to give it to her, I couldn't accept it. It means that I became a fragment of the evil spirit of my own will." Jin's pupils widened and also shook. However, after a few seconds, Jean quickly composed himself. "Even if everything Deepoo said was true, nothing would change. I know what you mean. Whatever the reason for choosing chaos, in the end it's a shame it ended up like this. Don't let me resent you either. Okay, it should come out like that." The brothers' swords were entangled again. As soon as the attack and defense began, the number of residual wounds on Deepoo's body increased. The wound no longer healed. Unlike before, now if you get fatally wounded just once, Dyphus will be over. Jin's sword still had no mercy. "Is this the area my brother reached before he was tainted by chaos? You're strong. Even a person this strong could not resist chaos. That's what I thought. However, being strong is only an objective standard. In fact, Deepoo's sword could not be a threat to Jean, who had risen to the rank of the strongest. Aya! Bradamanti cut Deepoo's waist. Blood poured out from the open wound. Immediately afterward, Deepoo's movements became noticeably slower. Monsters steeped in chaos don't care about these injuries, but humans slow down when they get hurt. That sight broke Jin's heart. Jean silently swung his sword. Every time the blade cut, tore, or pierced Deepoo's body, a frighteningly vivid sensation ran through his hands. The feeling that someone is killing their brother. Mother can't even be compared to me. Do you really think you can succeed in treason? Arg. A red-hot mass flowed from Dyphus' abdomen. He held it with one hand and swung the Bolgar like a ghost. You're going to save the world when you couldn't even save your family? Did you come to Rick Alton to save people? Stop talking nonsense, you are a hypocrite and a traitor. My mother may have accepted chaos, but she did not join hands with her archenemy. Flutter. A crack appeared on Balgur's sword body. The sword's lifespan is coming to an end as it withstands Jin's continued onslaught. Once, twice, 3 times. Every time Jin struck, Bradamanti sharp fragments flew out of Bolgar. A few of them passed Jin's face. Drops of blood flowed from Jin's cheek. Eventually, when the 7th attack followed, Bolgar was torn to pieces. Dyphus was radiating deadly force even though his sword and body were completely destroyed. A sinister look that seems impossible to break. Jin stopped walking for a moment and looked at Deepu's. Come. Are you hesitant? Have you stopped your sword now because you're afraid of killing me? A ray of sword energy shot out from the broken Bolgar. Jin didn't even avoid it. Because the aura was so weak, the black energy was swept away by Jin's energy and scattered somewhere before it could reach Jin. Nevertheless, Deepu's fired his sword energy several times. With each attempted attack, the sword's energy became lighter and lighter. Bolgar dropped the remaining fragments and blood spattered all over Dyphus' body. Even if he died like this, he was willing to leave at least a scratch on Jin's body. If even that was impossible, he had the determination to become a vengeful spirit and appear at least in his dreams. Or do you just want to laugh at me? That's not it. The reason Jin stopped was because he couldn't understand. A person so strong, a person who never gives in to death and pain, a person who can fight so cruelly. Why did he accept the power of the evil spirit? Have we succumbed to chaos? I couldn't understand it at all. Why did you do that? What made you like this? I am the only one who made me like this. Don't look for the reason elsewhere. Anyway, nothing changes as you say. Why do we still need someone to blame? Wrong. If you don't like this situation, blame yourself. The moment Deepu's spoke up to that point, suddenly a spirit began to swirl around him. Jin hurriedly tried to slay the soul energy surrounding Deepu's, but at the same time a white portal was opening in front of him. Boom! Jin! Mort, Cirrus, and Valeria were reaching out to Jin from the white portal. Valeria had been analyzing battlefield records the entire time and had just discovered the Prophet's final move. You can't stop and kill the 4th horseman now. We must eliminate the Prophet first. Valeria, what is that? The Prophet cast a spell on the 4 horsemen. It is an underworld magic that is set so that as soon as Dyphus dies, the powers he received are returned to the evil spirit. From the beginning, Deepu's goal was to restore his evil spirit through his own death. That's why the Prophet was able to buy time to complete the curse by pulling out the Jinn separately. If Jin had attacked Castle Rick Alton with his comrades from the beginning, the war would have ended before the Prophet cursed Dyphus. This meant that if Jin had killed Dyphus without questioning it, now Rosa would have awakened with his powers. Dyphus, who was engulfed in spirit behind the white portal, seemed to have disappeared without a trace. You can prevent the curse from being activated only by eliminating the caster first. Come on, the 4th horseman has now been summoned to Rick Alton Castle. We must go back, immediately kill the Prophet, and destroy the power of the 4 horsemen's evil spirits. As Jin climbed onto the moat, the white portal closed. Black energy of chaos was blooming like mold all over the snowy fields of the other world. If I kill my brother, the power will be returned to the evil spirit? Yes, to be exact, it is a curse that can only be activated if you are killed by your brother. Then the Prophet would have no reason to summon Dyphus now. Is it because you didn't know about the battle situation here? We don't know, but it's almost certain that something has gone awry in the Prophet's plans. He didn't lose his composure even though he was receiving combined attacks from our allies, but he suddenly got angry and tried to summon the 4 horsemen. I just happened to come here to give you information about the 4 horsemen. While the two were talking, Mott had already opened a new portal to the interior of Rick Carlton Castle. Boo-hawk boho! Soon the group who came out of the portal could hear Elena's angry voice. Are you crazy? You suddenly cut off the connection with the head of the family. If this happens, the head of the family will be in danger. Elena stopped speaking and covered her mouth. I saw a white portal open on the other side. Diffuse suddenly cut off the connection with the head of the family, so I hurriedly summoned him, wondering if he might have betrayed the evil spirit. Such a mess. She summoned Deepu's, never expecting that Valeria could track her down. Because of this, he couldn't help but be horrified to see Jean and his party suddenly appear inside the castle within a distance where they could hear their voices. The evil spirit became dangerous because my brother disconnected? As soon as I arrived at Rickalton Castle, I received unexpected information. Jean didn't miss Elena's puzzled look and immediately fired sword energy into her chest. Elena spread her protective shield even as her chest was pierced. You're making things go wrong again. Couldn't you have thought that rather than summoning me, I should have prevented them from coming to the wilderness? If that were the case, Jean would have eventually cut Deepu's and the curse would have been activated. Elena's shield was torn apart mercilessly by Jin's sword. Elena tried to run away by lifting Deepu's with her spirit, but she could not be faster than Jean. Ah! Sigh! Bradamanti stabbed Elena in the back as she just turned around. When the aura formed on the blade exploded, Elena's body exploded in all directions. However, the body is just a shell and the substance is the soul. The scattered pieces of meat soon turned into black smoke and began to spread throughout the castle. To be precise, not only Elena's body, but also Rickalton Castle itself was made up of the Prophet's chaos. Long before Runkendal was engulfed in chaos, the Prophet had been accumulating soul energy here. Now the area called Rickalton was no different from the Prophet itself. Damn! I didn't know it would turn out like this. Yes, I admit my mistake. But it worked out better. Ugh! Please save me. Please save me. As the entire castle was engulfed in smoke, the prisoners trapped throughout the castle were revealed. Unlike the prisoners in the plains, they were not trapped in the fruit of the giant tree. This was because the fruit that was imprisoning them had just been returned to the Prophet. Likewise, the giant beasts on the plain were also flocking to the direction where the group that had dispersed with their spirit was standing. I was sick and tired of pleasing bugs who depended on my mother's power. Black Storm. There seemed to be no more fitting expression for the gigantic spirit prophet who had spread on behalf of Rickalton Castle. Dyphus disappeared somewhere in that spirit. After examining the situation, Jean quickly came to a conclusion. Valeria, you and Cirrus escape immediately and join our allies. I deal with the prophet alone. If you're going to fight alone again, why did you bring your comrades in as temporary allies? Cirrus said. I don't mean to just leave you two and other allies alone. I will take charge of the battle, which means you must rescue the remaining prisoners. Cirrus narrowed her eyebrows as if she was worried. It was impossible to estimate the power of the prophet who revealed the truth. I've never seen an enemy of that type before, because the prophet was not a living being but looked like a natural disaster. But on the other hand, I also thought that there was no disaster in the world that could physically kill Jean. Okay, we'll stay out and focus on rescuing prisoners and protecting our allies. There will be some allies who have lost their way due to the unexpected spirit. In particular, Valeria and Cirrus possessed recording magic and teleportation, so they also had to take on the role of disseminating the situation in real time. As the two left, Jean looked up at the sky. It was all about the prophet's marriage. Is the transformation over? Indeed, he is the one who has been controlling Runkendal from behind. The reality is quite plausible. People who don't know better will think you are the witch Hilurim. Sigh dash. The black smoke moved like a snake and entangled Jean. Jean didn't dodge on purpose but gauged his strength and immediately burst out with energy, dissipating the spirit. If I were your mother, you wouldn't even be able to make eye contact with me. The fourth horseman and the fucking bastard. Once I got the hang of it, I felt like the prophet was continuously unraveling the rope of chaos nearby. This would be to kill temporary allies and prisoners. Of course, Jean had no intention of leaving it that way. Okay? Anyway, let me tell you in advance, our fight is one-on-one, prophet. Now stop harassing people. Anyway, I think calling out evil spirits is now a thing of the past. What if you don't like it? I have to personally help. The moment Jean answered with a stern expression, the prophet suddenly felt his senses encompassing the entire Rickalton becoming dull. That's a sign. Spirit Sword Ultimate Type 1. First night. As soon as Jean opened the first chestnut, the entire land of Rick Alton began to tremble. It was not because of its destructive power, but because the reality of the prophet who felt anxious was being distorted. Jean was thinking about the last battle with Lingling that he had experienced in La Perosa in the past. At that time Jean overpowered him with this sword in Lingling's subspace. There was no reason to be different just because he was a prophet. There is no way a monster that attracts human despair like a parasite would have the will to endure this. Jean slowly looks around at the true nature of the prophet. Since it is just like a black storm, it is hard to tell where its weak point is, just as you can't find a weakness against fog. But in other words, that meant that the entire black storm was a striking point. It's not an opponent that feels so burdensome that you have to find its weaknesses. Damn you! The scene of sword energy imbued with spiritual energy probing into the true nature of the prophet continued. The black sword energy was creating a storm that formed a prophet. How do you feel about focusing on me now? You guy! Although it was engulfed by the aura of the first night, the prophet was able to move the large entity well. However, as Jean said, he could no longer do anything to the allies and prisoners. There is no choice but to focus all power on Jean. Thanks to this, our soldiers were easily rescuing the prisoners. Jean speaks as if he has not lost his composure. In fact, I was in a state where I felt like I was going crazy due to extremely deep hatred. How on earth are we supposed to understand the fact that the family was corrupted by being swayed by something like this, and that the corrupt family is destroying the world? Deepoo's became a monster. Many people were brutally murdered here today. All of that drew anger from Jean. Jean was roaring without even realizing it. He couldn't even hear his own voice that shook the entire battlefield. A blue fire formed above Bradamanti. Eternalization, as the fire that never goes out began to mix with the black storm. The prophet screamed incessantly. Kawak! Shut up. Compared to what you've done, this isn't even a reward. Thanks to Jean tying up the prophet with the ultimate spirit sword, our troops had already rescued close to 70% of the prisoners. The prophet originally planned to use the captives as sacrifices to fight against the jinn, but the problem was that they were consumed too quickly on the first night. Even if prisoners had been used, the prophet would have barely escaped. Even the prophet now had no choice but to admit that fact. After seeing it, I can see that you are the Rick Alton of this place. Today this land will disappear completely from the world. Jean stabbed his sword like a demon into various parts of the prophet's shaking body. The chaotic fragments flying around were grabbed and crushed, and the large chunks that fell were trampled and torn. If it sees someone trying to regenerate, because eternalization does not ignite, they set it on fire even more viciously. If a beast were tearing through the fog, it would look like this. Even the allies were almost trembling at Jin's charming appearance. Plural. Jean was not fighting but was taking one-sided revenge. Occasionally the prophet attempted a pointless counterattack, but he never once threatened Jean. There is only one reason why prophets cannot disappear. Jean has no intention of ending him until the rescue of the prisoners is completed. Also, the prophet had only one thing to hope for. If the evil spirit comes even now, the 12 horsemen will have no choice but to retreat. We have to somehow make him kill Dyphus. However, Jean sneered, seeing clearly what was going on. It seems the curse is still in effect. There's nothing that can be called a face, but somehow I feel like I can see your expression. That's probably the only thing left for you to look forward to. Even while Jean was frantically slaughtering the prophet, he continued to check Dyphus' location. The dying Dyphus energy was so weak that even Jean was difficult to find. It's literally just breathing. Deepoo's flew towards the outer castle and fell to the ground at the moment Jean opened his first night. The rescue of prisoners there had been completed a long time ago, and the terrain was severely collapsed, so our troops were not including them in the search. It was also the point where Mary, who was receiving Jin's attack in the inner castle, was thrown away when Jeep's bombardment began. In other words, the person closest to Deepoo's right now was Mary. Ha ha ha. She had just regained consciousness and was walking unsteadily, because an all too familiar groan was coming from somewhere in the blackened dirt pile. Soon Mary saw the image of a person who had fallen to the ground with his entire body broken. Mary couldn't see it clearly because her vision was blurred. Even if it were someone other than Dyphus lying down, it would still look equally blurry in Mary's eyes. Still, Mary was certain. Even the blurry appearance felt familiar. Brother Deepoos. Dyphus did not respond and only breathed heavily. Mary called his name a few more times and then slumped down in her seat. I always cause accidents. This isn't it really. For a while Mary lowered her head, laughing and sobbing and hugging him. He rubbed his cheek and stroked his hair. He then stopped moving for a moment and took out a dagger from his arms. Her beloved sword, the Viper, was already broken inside. The dagger aimed at Dyphus' neck was trembling. Let's stop now, brother. Mary, who hesitated several times, finally remembered her resolve and struck down the dagger. It was conveyed clearly, the sensation of piercing my brother's skin and bones. But Mary soon realized that the dagger had pierced her brother's palm, not his neck. Dyphus raised his hand to block it. He was saying this as he felt his own blood and his brother's tears dripping down his face. Mary, if you kill me, the curse will be complete. What? I'm going to die anyway. So just wait for the youngest. Pow dash, pop. Signals were being fired all over the battlefield indicating that the rescue of prisoners had been completed.